Your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day returns. He is Cole Cusumano. I'm Steven Cusumano. Together, we are the Cusumano brothers and trying to win you some money as we come off of Memorial Day weekend, the greatest day in motorsports, the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indy 500, the Coca-Cola 600. Always a great time, but unfortunately this year, Cole, Mother Nature did not agree. A delay to the Indy 500 and a rain-shortened event at Charlotte, where Christopher Bell was reined in as a winner in the Coke 600, one of the crown jewels in motorsports, with a rain-shortened event that came to an end in stage number 3. So, of course, that was a damper. You know, it was a big letdown in and of itself that we didn't get this full race in, but especially with the timing of Kyle Larson's arrival from Indy to Charlotte and seeing as he would have been able to make it into that car if they continued the race. Obviously, when you look back on this event, that's going to be the big dampers. You know, we didn't get a chance to see Kyle Larson do the double, at least this year. But one thing stands for sure, and I know that there's one guy and one team that's extremely happy with the way things went, and that is Christopher Bell, who was the winner at the Coke 600.
This whole day just felt like one big gut punch, honestly. I mean, you mentioned it. There was the 4-hour rain delay for the Indy 500. Congrats to Joseph Newgarden, by the way, and going back-to-back. In that race, just felt good for Kyle Larson. He ran top 10 the entire day, and then succumbed to a speeding penalty with, I think it was lap 130, 131, and ended up finishing 18th, but just made his way up to 6th place at that point in time. And then, that same storm that prevented him from starting the Coke 600 made its way, sure enough, all the way to Charlotte, stage 3, as soon as he touched down at the track. And, just felt so bad for him. So much work and prep went in between him and Hendrick Motorsports and Arrow McLaren, and to see it all just wiped away that quickly was just so disappointing. Got a feel for him, but I got to imagine that he's really motivated to go out there and just put his foot down and lay a beating down the competition here in the Cup Series once again. One thing I was kind of thinking about when this race was called for rain was that, oh, great, we're going to have nothing to really go based off of for this week's episode. You know, these rain-shortened races, there's not a whole lot of, to go off of for these results. But honestly, looking at the top 10, we had 6 of the top 10 drivers mentioned in our episode, and just collectively looking at this top 10, how they all round up, I would say it's a very indicative top 10 for how these cars ran that day. Christopher Bell led over 90 laps, which was most of the race. Brad Kay had one of the best cars, or was trending towards one of the best cars once this race was called. Willie B also had a great car in this race. Denny Hamlin, another top 5 finish. So overall, it could have been a lot worse from a betting perspective, but there's a lot we can actually take away from this race and bring over into Gateway.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you look at that top 10, it wasn't one of those that was like an undeserving winner where there was a set of green flag stops or a late caution prior to that rain stoppage that, made the race look different than what it was really indicative of how the cars were running. But it definitely was one that Christopher Bell, you can look at this race and say that he was the deserving winner at that time that the race came to an end. But you mentioned Brad Kay, one of our sleepers from last week's episode. He wound up finishing 2nd. William Byron in 3rd was another one of the very deserving drivers. And, I think he would have had a really good chance to win that race. And you'd be looking at that pass in the grass or in the artificial grass or whatever you want to call it. It would have been an iconic move if we maybe saw this race to the end. But finishing 4th was Tyler Reddick. 5th, Denny Hamlin. They were both a couple of our favorites in the episode. Ty Gibbs had a strong day, starting from the pole and finishing 6th. Chase Elliott, my pick to win, wound up 7th. Ross Chastain 8th. Alex Bowman 9th, and Josh Berry 10th. Those were kind of two of our pretty big steals during the week, Cole. But as we close a book on a disappointing but yet fun Memorial Day weekend with this trifecta of racing, we're going to turn the page to Gateway this week. As the Cup Series takes the turn to St. Louis, you will be there. I know that's really exciting on that end of things for you because it's been a moment since you traveled, Cole. So just take me through your emotions first and foremost about how excited you are to make it to Gateway this week.
I just cannot wait to get out there. Flight will be, at the time you're hearing this tonight, Thursday evening. So looking forward to getting out there. It's always a really good show, or it's been a really good show, I should say, the past couple of years in the Cup Series at Gateway. Never been to St. Louis. I've driven through it when making my cross-country road trips, but to have an actual stop here and take in some NASCAR is going to be great. A lot of, obviously, uncertainty going into this one. Only a 2-race sample size, and the drivers who have had success in that small sample size have struggled very much this year in 2024. So I look for this to be a very telling race for quite a few teams that are in need of really good runs at this point in the season, with I think like 15 races until the playoffs. So should be a fun one. Looking forward to getting out there, and looking forward to earning you guys some money this weekend as well.
Yeah, and as we look at the pre-qualifying odds per DraftKings, it's pretty much a who's who of drivers that have been favorites this year. One reminder about our nickel or dime segment, it has moved to social media to make more room for us to help you win some money, and that is on @the_money stop on Facebook, Twitter, and especially Instagram. So give us your nickels and dimes, which are your favorites and least favorite paint schemes of the week, your 5s and 10s out of 10s. Get at us on social media, as we love to talk paint schemes at @the_money stop. Starting lineup will be determined Saturday at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. There's always some value to be had prior to the starting lineup in case the odds move, but I would definitely recommend waiting to see how things kind of shake out before locking in certain bets that maybe don't have as much value. But I teased those pre-qualifying odds. Cole, the favorite is Denny Hamlin at plus 550 right now, just barely in front of Kyle Larson at plus 600. And then you have three drivers tied for the third best odds in William Byron, Ryan Blaney, and Martin Truex Jr., all at plus 850 to round out the top five in pre-qualifying odds. So Cole, as we kick off the favorites category, let me start this thing off with Kyle Larson, because we talked about it. It was a disappointing but impressive week for Kyle after, he led some laps in the Indy 500, was running top 10 for most of the race and had that speeding penalty. But he's going to try and rebound. Like you said, Cole, this is still technically the May of Larson. It's going to become the June of Larson by the time this race takes place. But he's valued at $11,000 in daily fantasy, which is the second most expensive driver. He is down to third in the standings after missing the race at Charlotte, and will need that playoff waiver, of course, to end up making it, which I'm sure hopefully things will go well there. But looking at Kyle Larson at Gateway, he finished fourth with laps led there last year, and then 12th the prior year, 2022. Had an average running position of 14th and 15th in those races. So respectable results, not dominating, obviously, at this track over the past couple of years, but it is Kyle Larson. He's, like you said, Cole, one of the best talents in all of motorsports right now. And you look at the success with the laps led last year, and that's the closest results that we have to go off of entering this season. So as Kyle was looking for a chance to make a late run at that Coke 600, Christopher Bell swept up the hardware. He is plus 850 for the win and valued at $10,000 in daily fantasy. So he is also a co-favorite at third highest in the odds. Was a winner for the second time with 2 top 10s and 3 top 15s in his last 3 starts now. So Bell has quietly put together a nice roll here despite a 4-race skid with a best finish of 17th and 3 lower than 30th prior to that. So he had 4 really bad races and then the 3 top 15s over his last 3 starts. So he's trending in the right direction, of course, evidenced by the win. And he finished respectably at Gateway the last 2 years. 11th last year, or rather 9th last year, 11th the prior season. And he has some extra laps here because he won the Camping World Truck Series race at Gateway in 2016. So I think those extra laps, of course, matter. I know it was nearly 10 years ago, but you're looking at a driver that is hot, a team that is trending in the right direction, and very respectable results for C-Bell at Gateway at the track, the times that the Cup Series has made it over there. So I look at Larson and Christopher Bell as 2 guys that were pretty much top 2 in the headlines last week, and they're my top 2 for the win this week.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I mean, Kyle Larson's going to be a factor anywhere we go to. I think the determination and hunger is going to be even bigger now with that double failure and Mother Nature, washing that away. And real quick before I move on to my 2 picks, I did want to say we would be irresponsible to not give a shout out to Justin Allgaier and what he did in that 5 car. Just absolutely phenomenal work by him, finishing 13th in that race. They were running towards the mid-20s the first stage, were able to work their way up methodically throughout the entire race. And it made me feel very happy because Justin's one of those guys, we've been following him since the very beginning. Like when he was in the Nationwide Series for Penske, we were there, and we've seen him come so far and come so close to winning his first championship in the now Xfinity Series. And he's just one of the great dudes of the sport. So to see him finally get some redemption for what I'll call a twice-in-a-lifetime opportunity, speaking on the Jimmy Johnson fill-in in 2020, it made me feel really good. And I know a lot of people in the sport felt good about it as well. Christopher Bell, obviously looking really good right now. Just we have noted the inconsistencies throughout the regular season, so that's something to be worried about. For me, I'm looking at two Toyotas from the Gibbs camp, and the first one's going to be obviously our odds-on favorite at Denny Hamlin at plus 550 for the race win, and our most expensive driver for DFS at $11,200. Denny Hamlin, despite a rain-shortened Coke 600 and an experimental All-Star race, knocked off his fourth straight top 5 finish for points races and fifth straight top 5 if you include the All-Star race runner-up finish. So he has been red hot. I would say the best driver in the garage at this point in the season. He now assumes the points lead as well, with Kyle Larson missing that race. He ties Larson for most top 5s on the season with 6. So he has been just flat out dominant this year. And his only bad intermediate start this year was at Texas, where he led over 30 laps in that race. So we're going to another intermediate track in Gateway, where he has seen success, very good success. He ran 2 Xfinity races there early in his career. He finished runner-up there last year with an average running position of 3rd. So Denny Hamlin should figure to be a very, very strong contender for this win, as made evidenced by his race winner odds, obviously, and how he's done so far in the season. And the other guy I'm going to mention is someone who I was very high on last week and came away with an outside top 10 finish, came home 12th actually at Charlotte, in Martin Truex Jr., who was plus 850 for the race win, tied for the 5th best odds at the win, and $10,500 for DFS, our second least expensive driver in that regard, with Christopher Bell. MTJ looked incredible in this race. He had a top 5 car for sure, but just got caught back there due to a pit cycle and couldn't make his way through the field with the rain, obviously. But they have been as steady as they can be the entire season. Top 2 in the points, second place specifically for 7 straight weeks, with the second best average finish at 10.2. So he has been just flat out awesome. Again, very under the radar, but very consistent, and someone that I think is a DFS darling or a DFS dough-getter, you can call it, for this year. In reference to Gateway, he finished 6th with the second most laps led in the inaugural race, and then improved upon that, finishing 5th last year. So very consistent as well at Gateway in his career. He's been good at the intermediate tracks. This one kind of profiles a little bit like a short track, which, as we know, MTJ usually dominates, or at one point did dominate in one point in his career. So I'd look for him to be a really good contender for this win, as well as the other guys we mentioned, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, and Denny Hamlin.
So we're very heavy on the Toyotas. Kyle Larson was the only non-Joe Gibbs driver that we mentioned in that favorites category. And as I look at some sleepers, Cole, a little bit of a mixed bag here. I'm going to start off with Joey Logano, who's plus 1,400 for the race win this week, 9,300 in daily fantasy. I like Joey as a sleeper after, he's trending in the right direction. He had a 14th place at the Coke 600 last week, and that was his best points finish in 5 races, but he had the All-Star race win too, so you take that into consideration as well, which, of course, was at an intermediate track and in North Wilkesboro, kind of. It's honestly very similar to Gateway in that respect. But for Joey Logano, not only is he trending in the right direction, but he has been one of the best drivers in the sport at Gateway in the 2 trips we've made there. He won the inaugural race there 2 seasons ago and finished 3rd last year with no laps led, had an average running position inside the top 10 in both races. So for Joey Logano, just kind of a perfect storm for him. Not the start of the season he wanted, trending in the right direction. We've seen Ford on the upswing for sure, and we go to a track that he has a leg up on the competition, or at least has recently. So if it's not this week for Joey Logano in terms of at least the top 10, hopefully a top 5 or a points win, I don't know when it's going to be. So this is one where I want to see it from Joey, and I think we're going to see it this week at Gateway. And then my race winner pick from last week, Cole, was Chase Elliott, who's plus 1,600 for the win this week at Gateway and 9,000 in daily fantasy, which is some pretty solid value. And Chase is coming off top 15 finishes in his last 7 races in a row. And also last week at Charlotte, it was his 5th top 10 out of those 7 races. So he's just been a model for consistency this year. And for Chase, over those last 7 races, a 9.6 average finish. Where the apprehension comes in, of course, is that he didn't race here last year. This was after the point of Chase's injury. He finished 21st in his only start at the track, so he's logged less laps at this one than a lot of the competition. And then the flip side of the coin, the glass half full, rather, look at it, is the fact that his lowest finish on intermediate tracks this year is 12th. So Chase has been one of the top drivers in the garage this season at the intermediates, which is what Gateway is. Obviously, the glass half empty perspective is he only has 1 start here and finished 21st. So I'm proceeding with caution for both of these guys, Chase Elliott and Joey Logano, but I do feel good about the both of them. at least to a degree. I like where they're both at, and I would not be surprised if we find them in victory lane, and that's why I have them both as sleepers this week.
Absolutely. And I guess in reference to Chase Elliott, the one start does not really scare me a whole lot. I know track time or seat time at a foreign track, if you will, is really important with this new car. But I think Chase has proven on more than one occasion this season that he has been one of, if not the most consistent driver of the entire season. And even on the days they struggled, they've been able to rally and get a top 10 finish. So I think he's definitely, almost a lock every single week for DFS. And it's only a matter of time before those wins start coming. As those summer months start heating up, I think he's one guy that turns it on, as is the guy I'm about to mention in Ross Chastain. Summer's heating up, so is Ross Chastain. Plus 2,000 for the race win, and $8,200 for DFS, which is a borderline value pick, actually. Coming off a top 10 at Charlotte for the first time since COTA in week 6. And prior to that, finished 11th at Darlington and 7th in the All-Star race. So, you think of summer, you think of watermelon, you think of Ross Chastain. We're going to Nashville here in a few weeks, so I think Ross Chastain definitely rounding into form. In regards to Gateway, he finished 8th there in the inaugural race and 22nd last year, so definitely a bit of polar opposites, if you will, in regards to the results. But he had an average running position of 13th or better in both those races, 13th and 12th to be specific, actually. So he's run well at Gateway, he's run consistently at Gateway, and he also has a win there in the Truck Series back in 2019, so fairly recently. And I think, like I mentioned, I think extra seat time, regardless where you go, is going to be important, but especially for a track where there isn't much experience at all in the Cup Series. So Ross Chastain should have a really strong day at Gateway, as well as the guy who I'm calling the value of all values this week, as well as a legitimate contender for this win, in Kyle Busch, who has made headlines the last few weeks for the good and the bad. Obviously, we all remember the punch thrown by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in the All-Star race. But beyond that, Kyle Busch has had speed, and the results have been coming there as of late. So he has 3 top 15s, including 2 top 10s over the last 4 races. That includes a 15th-place result at Charlotte this past week, where they were trending in the right direction had this thing not get rained out. However, you look at Gateway, he has been the best of the best in the Cup Series. A 2-time winner here, 1 time in Cup, which came last year, and then 1 time in the Xfinity Series. And in reference to his Cup race last year, he dominated, leading half the laps, and he finished runner-up in the inaugural race with most laps led in that race as well. So he's led most all the laps. He's won a race here. He's finished 1-2. There is no reason why Kyle Busch should not be in your DFS lineup at $8,800 and be considered for the race win and top 5 prop values at plus 1,500 for the race win and plus 140 for a top 5 finish in this race. Love both these drivers, but especially Kyle Busch. I think that he has potential to be a really good pick this week, again, for DFS and race winner.
I would completely agree. I think that Kyle Busch definitely belongs in pretty much any DFS lineup that's being created. We'll see where he starts, but Kyle Busch is one of not one of the best sleepers, but he's one of the best values overall this week, and definitely one I'm heavily considering for a lot of different bets this week. But as he's a value in that category, Cole, let's talk some actual value picks, specifically for daily fantasy. I want to start off with a couple of guys that are coming off of borderline top 20 finishes, and this is value picks, a deeper dive. You're not looking for a race win. You're looking for maybe a top 15, top 10 day, a lot of place differential points in DFS. And I want to start with Justin Haley because he finished where he started at Charlotte last week, which was 22nd. Very respectable, no place differential points, but he's performed better than the results show the last 3 weeks. He had a top 10 at Darlington, which was great and indicative of where he was for that race and how impressive it was. And then he had a top 15 pace for the other 2, despite not finishing there. But the point being made here is for Justin Haley, he has hovered as a top 15 car at the intermediate tracks as of late this year and in general. I mean, he's just been a guy that's made us look really smart. And every time we've gone to an intermediate, we've talked about Justin Haley in this category, and he's made us look pretty smart. So I look at Justin Haley, too, and the fact that we talked about extra seat time. He's got 3 Truck Series starts here, including a top 10 and a win in 2018. So at 5,700 in daily fantasy, sign me up for Justin Haley. I think he could steal a top 10 if he's lucky, potentially a top 15, top 20, at maybe a floor for Justin Haley. But at that price, 5,700, it is hard to find a better value than that. I also really like this week Michael McDowell, Cole, 6,500 in daily fantasy, Finished 16th last week after back-to-back top 10s entering the 600. And again, I don't want to read too deeply into last week's results because you raced in the Coke 600 kind of anticipating the rest of the race and setting yourself up for the 400 laps, 600 miles, whereas everyone didn't necessarily have a chance to play out their full strategies. But for Michael McDowell, 16th place nonetheless is very respectable, and he's going to have limited chances to win before the playoffs. Just looking at how the schedule breaks out for McDowell, obviously we go to any of the road courses, and Sonoma especially, definitely somebody I'm looking for at the road courses, but his next best shot behind Sonoma might be this week, as he's 23rd in the standings and a dozen races to go for Michael McDowell. Looking at his career at Gateway, last year finished in 18th and led 34 laps in that race, so he ran better than what that position would indicate, and he finished 9th there at the first race. Very similar stat line to William Byron in these two races of 8th and 19th, so he's got some good company there, and he's got a couple of Xfinity Series races as well at Gateway, so when I look at that value for Michael McDowell at 6,500, the fact he's run well here with limited time, and the fact he's had some extra seat time, I'm a fan of Michael McDowell's this week. We'll see how things go for the Michael McDowell machine as Front Row Motorsports announced this week another charter being added to the fold too. So, Michael McDowell is going to leave that team after the end of this season, but he wants to get them one last win before he heads over to Spire Motorsports by the end of the year. And like I was mentioning before, Cole, this presents as good of an opportunity as any of the ovals for Michael McDowell, I feel like.
Without a doubt. He's someone I actually think about when we come to Gateway in the short time that we've been coming here, just because those laps led and that shot at the win back in his first race. But looking at this value picks category, I am a huge fan of all four drivers because they're actually four good values. You've got two drivers in the $5,000 range, one in the $6,000, one in the $7,000, and that's low $7,000s. And I'm happy you mentioned the extra charter being bought up by Stewart Haas Racing, which is very, very sad time for the sport. Just seeing this championship winning team go to basically being tossed to the side. Sick over it. Sad for all the drivers and the team members involved with this happening. But good segue, regardless, into my two drivers. Michael McDowell going to Spire Motorsports next year. And then Front Row bought the, obviously, SHR charter. So I'll go with the Spire side of things in Zane Smith for this week. Zane Smith is our cheapest driver in the value picks category at $5,400, and that's for obviously good reason, because going back 9 races to Richmond, he has a best finish of 24th in that stretch. In my opinion, it can only go up from here, and I think that can definitely begin with Gateway, because this is where Zane Smith made his debut infamously back in 2022, subbing for Chris Buescher when he got injured from that Coke 600 wreck. He finished 17th that day in his very first NASCAR start, very last minute in this viscerally different next-gen car, and that was really, really impressive to me and a lot of people in the industry. So I look for this to be a place where he can find some sort of, lost glory or comfortability maybe. And speaking with Zane and his crew chief, Steven Duran, earlier this week, that seems to be the expectation and the mindset going in, that coming here for a second time and having the prior success will bring about some positive energy, positive momentum for this team. And just like looking at Zane Smith as a whole this year, I know the results haven't been there collectively, but the results just have not equaled out either, because in the intermediate races, he's had like that top 20, top 15 speed, and they've not been able to close it out. It's been mistakes on pit road, mistakes on track, you name it, it's gone wrong for them. So I think this will be a good race to see where they kind of stack up. I do think it'll be a good one for that 71 team. But looking at his other Gateway starts, he has 5 Gateway starts in the Truck Series with a best finish of 5th. And speaking again with Zane and Steven, they have top 20 ambitions for this weekend and hopes that they can propel them forward into the second half of the season. So I do like Zane Smith. He's our cheapest driver in this category for a reason, but definitely worth a look. And then finally, I'm going to highlight Josh Berry here at $7,200, who I correctly called for a top 10 finish last week, which wound up being his second straight top 10. So back-to-back top 10s for this Ford team. And just hearing some comments from him, from Kevin Harvick, and people in the industry, this team is really hitting their stride right now. You could tell it on track. They're running, borderline top 10 and challenging for those on a weekly basis, it seems like. So I think this is, again, a track that kind of profiles like a short track in a way, even though it's a mile and a quarter. And I think it will suit him very well. He has the one Gateway start in the Truck Series where he finished 15th. No Cup start is a little bit alarming, but I think with the news of the Stewart-Haas Racing team, ceasing operations, you got to think of this now as a new audition for this team and all 4 drivers at Stewart-Haas Racing, because there's a lot of uncertainty looking ahead now. And it's just, I think the objective stays the same, obviously. Keep going out there to win races, score quality finishes, but now you got to just be more conscious of that and scoring those quality finishes and having those quality days.
Yeah, really, obviously, like you said, Cole, very disappointing and disheartening news, I guess would be the right way to put it. But I love Josh Berry. I think you're 100% right. This team is hitting its strides right now. He's a great value and the most expensive of our value picks, but still a value nonetheless when he's coming off back-to-back top 10s. And I like Zane Smith. But let's get this down to 6 drivers, Cole. We just named a dozen, 2 each from our favorite sleepers and values tiers. Out of our favorites category, Cole, I'm going to take Christopher Bell from that category. Just really like what that team's at this year. I'll take Joey Logano from the sleepers, and I will take Justin Haley from the value pick section.
For me, I was very high on him last week, and I'm going to stick with my guns this week with MTJ. I think he had a car capable of winning that race last week at Charlotte, and I think he is upset that it didn't go the full distance. So I look for him to be a really strong contender at Gateway. For my sleeper, I'm going to go with Kyle Busch. Those stats at Gateway in the Cup Series are way too good to ignore. 1-2 finish here, most laps led in both races. Sign me up. And for my value pick, I'm going to go with Josh Berry. Just kind of spoke on all the things I liked about him and the stride that they're on right now with Rodney Childers and that 4 team, and just the prospects looking ahead and what they need to do to secure a ride for next year. So I look for all 3 of those drivers to have a really strong race in Gateway.
Cole, let's discuss some big money bets. We've gone through a little bit of DFS, and we're going to give you our lineup in just a couple moments. But let's talk prop bets here. Big money bets, we call them because we can put bigger money on them than a typical race winner pick. I think there's some value, Cole, to be had in top 5 bets this week. I really like Kyle Busch at plus 200. Talked about his success here. I'd be really surprised if it's not a top 5 day for Kyle Busch. But at the very least, even a top 10. Looking at Kyle Busch, minus 165 in the top 10, just not enough of a value for me to bite on it. So that's why I like the top 10 odds quite a bit there for him. And then you could look at a guy like Josh Berry at plus 200 for a top 10, which would be a third straight top 10 for all the reasons you just mentioned, as another guy I really like. But I think generally speaking, Cole, I really like that a lot of the value seems to be in the top 5s. You could look at even a Joey Logano plus 175. But I just really like that Kyle Busch top 5 pick this week.
Yep, as big money bets, the 2 that I was looking at were that Kyle Busch went at plus 200 for sure, and then MTJ top 5 plus 130. I also do like that Josh Berry one as a look for a big money bet. Was it plus 200 to finish top 10? And then one that I like is not as much as a big money bet, but just as a bet in general, is Michael McDowell for a top 10 at plus 600. Because if you throw $5 on that and it cashes out, it's $35. So it's worth a look. I think he knows this is a race where he has to execute, and he's won well here in the past. So those would be my top 4 that I would definitely look at, but especially the MTJ and Kyle Busch top 5 prop bets.
It's a great call. Now let's talk about some head-to-head bets, Cole. Match bets that you're able to parlay with one another. So we got some head-to-head matchups here that, as is the case pretty much every week, they're pretty close. But the matchups this week, we got Truex versus Bell. We got Blaney versus Byron. Buescher versus Chastain. Kyle Busch versus Chase Elliott. Tyler Reddick against Ty Gibbs. Hamlin versus Larson. And then Keselowski versus Logano. These, Cole, I feel like I mentioned, they're very even a lot of weeks. I feel like this is a week where you could flip a coin on all 7 of those, literally, and just take your chances with it. Those feel so close to me.
Yeah, and that's evidenced by their odds payout for each matchup. They're all under even, and they're all 50-50 in my opinion, which is what Vegas is predicting. So there's 7 matchups here, which is like one of the most we've seen on a given week, and I don't like any of them. So I would stay away from the head-to-head. I would put my assets towards DFS lineup, top 5 prop bet, and then race winner bets.
Love it, Cole. I want to talk some DFS lineup construction here because, again, you look at the fact that, you want to look at the starting lineups prior to locking in a starting lineup for daily fantasy. But you and I both, when we constructed our lineups, went a very similar direction. I think I open up the app, I immediately select Kyle Busch because I just love his DFS value this week. So Kyle Busch, I led off my lineup with him in 8,800. And then you and I picked a few other common drivers. We both had Martin Truex Jr. as our ace at 10,500. Josh Berry as one of our value picks, 7,200. And then Justin Haley at 5,700. Those are the four drivers you and I had in common. When I made my lineup, I wanted another ace in it. So I went with Denny Hamlin, 11,200. And then to compensate on the other side, I went with another value at Michael McDowell. So I went with three guys I think are capable of winning the race. Busch, Hamlin, Truex, and rounded it out with guys I think are capable of finishing in the top 15 in Berry, Haley, and McDowell. And as I mentioned, you had four similar drivers in your lineup. You went a little bit of a different direction with yours. Rather than paying the big price for someone like Denny Hamlin, you went with two more very solid drivers that also could very well get a win.
Right. I went with Ross Chastain at $8,200 and then Joey Logano at $9,300 as the other two drivers that were different from yours. And honestly, like as you go through yours, I like yours a little bit better, obviously. Having three drivers who are likely going to run up front and finish up front, and probably one of them is going to win the race. I do think that Logano and Chastain are good picks. Chastain, I mentioned, has looked good as of late. He gets better as the year goes on. We're getting into the summer months. And then, yeah, Logano. He obviously has the win here in the inaugural race and has good stats here in general. So, I mean, I don't think it's a bad lineup by any stretch, the one that I constructed. But the one that you picked, I think, presents a better chance to win some money with those bigger, high-profile drivers. And I think that, swapping a Michael McDowell for a Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin in place of Joey Logano, that gives you a much better chance to win some money this week.
And again, I like the fact that we kind of go our own ways with making these lineups because it gives you options based on where they qualify. I will never place a DFS NASCAR lineup definitively until I see the starting lineup. I'll plug this one in and then tweak it after I see the starting positions because then yours might be a better chance to win. So, apples or oranges, whatever you want to look at it, I think that there's a lot of good options in daily fantasy this week because I feel pretty good about our value picks as well as the value that is in our sleepers category this week. So I like where we're at this week, Cole. Let's get down to business, though, and take it to the bank. Put our money where our mouth is. I mean, this is the money stop. Let's get serious and talk race winners. Sometimes we go with a little bit of a gut call. We each pick a winner, and we each pick a sleeper. The sleeper's got to be outside the top 15 in the odds per Vegas. So I feel like we're on the same page this week, Cole. We both think it's going to be a Joe Gibbs Toyota, and I think I may have picked your driver, but I'm going to pick Martin Truex Jr. for the win this week. I go first this week. You got first pick last week and went with Denny. But, I feel very strongly that it's going to be a Joe Gibbs Toyota. I feel good about Seabell, but in spite of the win last week, the results have just been so inconsistent. And I want to see more of a sustained run like he had at the Coke 600 last week. But like you said, an intermediate track that plays like a short track, I think this is Martin Truex Jr.'s week.
Well, you are correct. You did indeed take my pick for the win. You look at these two races in the Cup Series at Gateway so far, they've both been won by former champions, and I definitely think that it's time for MTJ to get back into victory lane. It's been way too long. He's been way too good to be held out for however long it's been. So, full transparency, that's my pick for the win as well. I don't want to. I hate going back-to-back with winners. I do feel good about Denny, but I'll just differentiate and go with Kyle Larson this week because I think that, slipping to third in the standings, missing the 600, that's going to weigh heavy on him. It evidently has in the interviews. So I think he's going to be motivated to go out there and get it done. I know he hasn't had the best results here, but I think that he's someone that no matter what, he's going to be a contender for the win. And then for a sleeper, we're looking at 15th and lower in the race winner odds, which would be Alex Bowman and below. I'm going to go with Alex Bowman, actually, because he's done very well over the past few weeks. He's been very, very under the radar, but clicking off top 15, top 10 finishes, posting top 10 speed. He also had a top 5 car in the Coke 600, but did not get the finish he necessarily deserved due to the rain. But He's been really, really good, been overshadowed by a lot of drivers, but I think before long he's going to emerge from the shadows and pick up a win here. And very well could happen at Gateway. You never know.
I'm with you there. I feel pretty good, like you said, about where that team is at right now. And it's good to see because we've seen it past couple of years where they come out of the gates really strong in February, March, April, and then this is kind of the time of year where they slow down. But they seem to be peaking into their best form as of right now. And this track proposes a good week for him to continue that string of momentum. I'll take some Josh Berry for my sleeper pick. I like what you had to say about Berry. You've convinced me. I really feel that there's a little bit of pressure on all these Stewart-Haas racing teams as they're impending free agents essentially now, barring whatever else is happening behind the scenes. But in spite of that, they've been trending in the right direction. So I think that they want to get that 4-car back in victory lane at some point prior to the end of the season, and I feel good about where that team is at. So I'll take Josh Berry as my sleeper. But Cole, you're going to be at the track, so you're going to have all of the great information coming from within, and there's something to be said for that. So I think we've had some of our really successful weeks on this podcast, Cole, when you've been at the track in person, and we saw that a lot early in the season. Excited to have you there, and I know you're excited to get out there to St. Louis and bring all of the intel onto the Money Stop airwaves.
It's been a long time coming since Phoenix in March, so I do want to say in the 2 races I went to the track this year, I am 2-0 and picking the race winner, so definitely want to stay plugged to social media. Obviously got the Kyle Larson win, the Christopher Bell win at Vegas and Phoenix respectively. And I feel like whenever you're at the track, you just get a feel for who has a really good handle on the track and the car and all that stuff throughout the weekend. So we'll be providing updates. Going to have a bunch of stories coming out through Kicking the Tires. Mentioned one with Zane Smith returning to the side of his debut. Obviously going to get a lot of, I think, really good comments from all the Stewart-Haas guys. Going to talk to some truck guys like Ben Rhodes and his struggles as a reigning champion with his new crew chief. Want to get with Josh Berry as well, talk a little bit about his success, and now obviously the SHR news, but lots to talk about, playoff waivers as well with Kyle Larson. So it's going to be a fun weekend. I'm looking forward to it, and it should be a very profitable one for everybody listening at home.
Absolutely. It's going to be this Sunday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and you can catch it on Fox. Again, it's fun, Cole, because this is a track that's unfamiliar. I think that in and of itself proposes the opportunity for just an wide open playing field. A lot of uncertainty going in, and that usually creates a pretty entertaining and competitive race. But really excited for this one, the Enjoy Illinois 300, which will take place once again this upcoming Sunday. So we're going to drop the jack on this, your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. He's Cole, I'm Steven, we are the Cusumano brothers, and we'll see you next week.